All right, we are down a man, but we carry through. It is off-season talk with the man, the myth, the legend, Dustin Baker. Dustin, back again. I mean, just it's a monthly spot. It's my favorite part of the season almost because there's no games to lose, and we get to talk to Dustin. Or I guess it's just I get to talk to Dustin. We have a really good show for you guys tonight, going through some quarterbacks in the draft, as you know, that's kind of the hot topic. And Will was so disgusted by this show, he called out sick. But in all seriousness, best wishes to the good ones. Dustin, how we doing? How is life?
Not bad. It is an important topic because you would think the Vikings, before too long, probably this draft, need a quarterback. And I agree with you that this offseason is really fun. It's in general in an offseason, it's fun because the puzzle comes together. You know, which 27 free agents are going to leave out the door. Half of them will be back or so, maybe even more. And then which guys will they bring in 3 weeks? And then the draft, to me, is almost like a Super Bowl level of excitement draft night. Anyhow, and it just feels like this offseason is shaping up to be a real humdinger in a good way.
Yeah, we were talking before cameras were rolling and mics were live, and I was comparing it to, it feels like there's a new coach and GM. There's not. We have the same coach, the same general manager, that people apparently despise both of them now. All of a sudden, after 2 years, one of which the team won 13 games and had a home playoff game. But there's definitely change in the air. Before we dive into quarterbacks, I want to really quickly, for anybody that watches the show, one, if you're not following this man on Twitter, Dustin, what is your actual Twitter at? Because I don't know it off the top of my head. So
Sure.
where can the people find you?
It's at Dust Baker, D-U-S-T Baker, B-A-K-E-R, Dust Baker.
Beautiful. So if you're not following him on Twitter, make sure you're doing that. Also, if you're on X, it's X now, I shouldn't be saying Twitter, but if you're on X, follow the show at LTB Vikings. Really quickly, before we get into the QBs, the Vikings moved the contract expiration date for Marcus Davenport today. Tell everyone why we shouldn't panic, and this doesn't mean Marcus Davenport is going to be a Viking next season. Just walk the people through this with that big brain of yours.
Oh, well, thank you for the compliments. Why was this even a thing, or why was this news? Why did people bitch about this? I've come to learn as a Vikings fan, especially once I got into Vikings Twitter over 5 years ago, it's always the people that are disgruntled that bitch the loudest. So take that with a grain of salt. Most of the folks, I would hope, are reasonable. But this Marcus Davenport thing, what they did was say, hey, we've pushed this deadline for a decision on him until March 13th, so it aligns with Kirk Cousins' deal and Danielle Hunter's deal. If they do not re-sign Davenport, which they probably won't, then his dead cap hit, which was already scheduled, so $6 million of it, hits against this cap. The same thing with Kirk Cousins. His is a lot more. But the sentiment was what are they doing? They're kicking the can down the road again. It's no, they gave themselves 3 weeks of flexibility to perhaps bring Davenport on a team-friendly dinker deal because he hardly played last year. That guy's going to get close to zilch money on the open market. The Vikings did the same thing with a better player in Dalvin Tomlinson last year. Nobody cared. They just bought themselves an extra few weeks to figure out if there's a path to bring this guy back at a really cheap option. And they didn't hey, we're going to kick his money into 2028, baby. They just said, hey, let's wait for about 3 weeks to figure out if we can get this guy back for 1 year, $2.5 million or something.
Yeah, I think it got misconstrued big time. I do think there were a lot of people. I saw a lot of people. And granted, I think a lot of them were they're not tuning into shows like this one. They're not watching, the big Vikings podcast. They turn the game on Sunday and they drunkenly give their opinions on Sundays. And so I think they saw Marcus Davenport, deadline extended or whatever phrasing it was. And they said, what are they doing? This guy couldn't stay on the field. And like you said, they're just saying, hey, we don't want to make this decision today. Let's make it 3 weeks from now. And I don't know if it was you, if it was someone else that said, hey, Danielle Hunter he might not be back. So if Danielle Hunter comes in to negotiate and says, no, give me $100 million total money, I want this massive, I want a Nick Bosa contract, the Vikings would say, shucks, well, we can't do that. Sorry. thank you for being a Viking. You've been a great player. And then we would sign a guy like Davenport and probably have to address edge rusher in the draft, which if you didn't tune into last week's show, we talked about some edge rushers for some draft preparation. So make sure you check that out. But I'm not clickbaiting people. Name of the show is going to be talking about QBs. Let's talk about QBs. Dustin, this is your soapbox. I know you are a big Drake May guy. I can't say you're the biggest Drake May guy because honestly, I feel like it used to be a hot take to say, yeah, no, Drake May is like probably the guy in this draft. Caleb Williams isn't. I know I have seen more people say Drake May, it should be the number 1 pick than I have Caleb Williams should be the number 1 pick at this point. So Drake May, make your case for trading up and getting him. How does he fit into the offense? What makes him special?
Sure. There's a lot to get into here, so I'll try to keep it concise. Last year, when I identified all of the quarterbacks in last year's class, C.J. Stroud was my guy, and I advocated for the Vikings to trade up to get him with the assumption that he could tumble to 4 or 5 or so. That was like in the tender weeks before the draft. He ultimately went 2, and the Vikings couldn't afford that. But that's the guy I wanted last year. So in that same vein, what I do when I go through and scout these first and second round quarterbacks, because I'm a Vikings fan, is I want to avoid the guy who's going to be a bust. Like, I understand you can take a big risk and hope for Lamar Jackson, 5 years ago now, and really strike oil. But from a Vikings perspective, I don't want to get set back 4 years and have this regime get this pick wrong. So after doing all of those checks, I also look at age. It really gets on my nerves when you look at a quarterback and they're like, hey, he's 24. He'll be 25 by the time we need him. I can't stand that. That's why I didn't like Hendon Hooker last year. That's why I'm a little turned off about Michael Penix. So I like the youth. Of course, you look at the size. You kind of like that prototypical part. And every time I keep putting all of them through my test, Drake May, the intangibles are there. And then the tangibles, I can't see a way that this man struggles at an NFL level. Now, he might not be good as C.J. Stroud or Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert in his first year. Few are, even though those guys were. So I think Drake May could need a little bit of time, but I also think dropped into an offense with TJ Hawkinson eventually, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Christian Darrisaw, whatever they decide at running back, I really think he would be all ready to thrive. I love the way he throws the ball. It's a real consistent motion. He's got the arm. He's got that, that. He's not a running quarterback. There's this thing we do in football where we mix and match mobile quarterback with running quarterback. Like Aaron Rodgers to me was a mobile quarterback, but he never really tucked and run that much. I want a guy who does the Patrick Mahomes thing in the postseason. When it's 3rd and 8, you're screwed. You know he's going to scramble up the middle and get the first down. It seems like it's a vintage elite quarterback tactic, and I see Drake May do that in North Carolina. So he is my guy. I can be talked into a lot of the others, and we're going to get into that. It's just I am hell-bent on the prediction side that the Vikings have to draft a quarterback in round 1 or maybe round 2 if they're going to get cute and wait for, if McCarthy had a weird fall. But I just can't envision the team doing a competitive rebuild 3 drafts worth and not having a quarterback to go along with it. Now, if Cousins was 32 or something, I'd be like, hey, no, we're good to go. But he's going to be 36 coming back off a bad Achilles. So I am absolutely convinced that they're going to draft a quarterback with high round capital.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we're staring down the barrel of, and I've said multiple times, I would be shocked if the Vikings aren't picking inside the top 3 if Cousins isn't back. Now, if we start getting news that, like, hey, the deal is close. Like, there's been reports that Cousins wants $90 million, and there's been reports that the Vikings, don't want to give him more than X amount of years or whatever. There's been all these reports coming out. If they do decide to go with Cousins, I don't see them trading up to get a quarterback. I do see it being a 2nd or 3rd round pick, a la the Kellen Mond pick, which in hindsight was a terrible pick, but like Jalen Hurts was also a 2nd round pick, and he turned out okay. So it's not impossible, it's just unlikely. My guy is, and this is mainly because when I look at the draft, I feel like Chicago, I won't even I haven't even really evaluated Caleb Williams. I have, but I haven't really given it the time I should. And every time I talk about quarterbacks, I leave him out. I think that he has the talent. There's questions there, yeah, but I love Caleb Williams. I think he's going 1. I think all of this talk about, maybe Drake May will go 1. I think it's all rubbish, trash, throw it out. I think he's going number 1. Whether it's to Chicago, we'll see if if Washington wants to move up or if New England wants to move up. I think Chicago's going to stick. I think they're going to take him. So it makes it from like, oh, there's 3 guys up there to, well, there's really 2 because we're not going to trade up with Chicago to get that number 1 pick. So you like Drake May, and that's really funny to me because my guy in this draft is Jaden Daniels, and I did a complete 180 on him about halfway through the season. I had money put on Florida State in like the first week of college football when LSU played Florida State, and I was like, yeah, Florida State's going to win. Jaden Daniels can't throw the ball. He's my least favorite type of college quarterback. No NFL potential. Like, I just did not believe in him at all. And then to see what he did over the course of this season, not just, yes, he made a lot of electric plays with his legs, a lot of stupid plays with his legs. He takes some unnecessary hits. That's one of his downsides. You're going to have to coach that out. But what he did with that arm, it was just impressive to me. I really think he can make just about every throw. And then one of my big things when I'm watching quarterbacks, and I think I might have a crush on one of them, I like to listen to like podcast interviews and post-game interviews and just hear how they sound. Do they sound timid? Do they sound cocky? Kind of try to get a glimpse into like what their personality would be. And Jaden Daniels, after he won the Heisman, went on Ryan Clark's podcast with the Heisman Trophy. And listening to that podcast, I really fell in love with this guy. I really liked it. It sealed the deal for me.
Yeah.
He's like really good friends with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. And he basically said, like, my goal is to be better than, like, CJ Stroud just had one of the best rookie years in history. I now have to go have the best rookie year in history. Like, that's what I expect to do. And I just, man, I don't know. And maybe it's because he has Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. to throw the ball to. That helps for sure. But he's not going to be throwing to scrubs, as you alluded to. He's going to have some offensive weapons in the NFL. So I really love Jaden Daniels. And I think that New England pick is obtainable. The question is, can the Vikings outbid Atlanta, any of the other teams that are also in love with Jaden Daniels? I want to talk about a guy. You kind of dropped his name a couple of seconds ago. I want to talk about J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. I think we may be seeing a little bit of Will Levis syndrome with J.J. McCarthy, where all throughout, the end of the NFL postseason, when mock drafts really started picking up, it was like J.J. McCarthy is a late first, early second round pick. And now, like, now he's a top 10 pick. Now he might be the third overall pick. The Vikings might have to trade up to 2 to get J.J. McCarthy. Like, there's all of these reports. I think we're seeing a little bit of inflation here. I do want to get your opinion on J.J. Obviously, he played for that Michigan team that was mostly run game and defense. Did you see enough out of him to spend potentially the 11 on him? Would you move up to like 9 or 11, or not 11, 9 or 7, would you move up a few picks to get him? Oh, do you think that's way too rich? He should be like the 32nd pick.
I would, if forced, if Kwesi got the inkling that, oh shit, I got to get up to 8 or 9 to get him. That won't be terribly expensive, because if you already have the 11th pick, it doesn't cost a ransom to get up to 8th. The thing that is very unique about J.J. McCarthy is he was very good. If you look at any advanced metric, whether it's third down or anything that's situational, he was damn good, right up there with the blue chip prospects. It's just that his team was so damn good and foundationally sound that Michigan didn't need him to take over or be Patrick Mahomes at a college level, like the Chiefs type of way. But then they just went ahead and also won the championship. So it puts like all the QB wins people like, well, yeah, this is the guy. But he is more than a QB wins guy. I will very much be excited if he's taken at 11, but I would want Kirk to be back for a single season, because I don't know if McCarthy would be ready to go out of the gate, and I really don't want the Vikings to go out and get some other bridge quarterback moron. I don't want to do that. If that's the plan, just keep Cousins, or, God forbid, roll with Nick Mullins again for the first 3 weeks of the season. I just don't like. I think it brings me back to the bad parts of Vikings football from my youth and childhood. Is like, hey, we're just gonna go get a bridge quarterback, and then I don't know. I would rather the Vikings either tell themselves we can win a Super Bowl this year with Kirk Cousins and go all in with him and draft McCarthy, or just say, you know what, it's Jaden Daniels, folks. We're starting him week 1. But J.J. McCarthy has the youth. He just turned 21, so he's like younger than Bridgewater was when we drafted Bridgewater. And he's not just a product of Michigan. I think a lot of folks have spent necessary time in the past 2 weeks debunking that myth that he's just some game manager system guy that Harbaugh polished. No, he's really quite good, and he's only going to get better at age 21. So I would be thoroughly excited by McCarthy. And then I also really like Jaden Daniels. If that's the one that's obtainable because of the would-be Patriots trade at number 3, I would love it. The Patriots need a quarterback. The Patriots need 2 offensive tackles, 2 wide receivers, and an edge rusher. So they might be in a spot where they can trade down and get a haul from the Vikings, and then they can pick J.J. McCarthy at pick number 11. So I want people to be cognizant of the Patriots being a trade partner. The only thing I wish Jaden Daniels was about 20 pounds heavier to absorb some of those hits. I think I'm spoiled watching Dante as a young 20-something. He was 260. And what is Jaden Daniels like between 200 and 210? So he's his frame is a little teensy for the way he likes to play. But I'm guessing that can be mitigated, whether it's just a good coaching or he puts on a couple extra pounds. So I would be very happy with Jaden Daniels, and then McCarthy. If they must bring Kirk back, I think that is the compromise for everybody, and that's why it's gotten so popular, McCarthy to Minnesota, this is the way you can bring Kirk back and then also draft your quarterback of the future.
Yeah, it's kind of having your cake and eating it too, and I actually hate that idea, and it's just because, like, if Kirk's coming back, and I've said this on the show before, I would rather see the Vikings be like, yeah, no, we think we can win a Super Bowl, so we're bringing Kirk back, and he's got dead money into 2028 or 2029 now. We might take, like, we're going to talk here in a minute about, like the Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, day 2, day 3 pick, quarterback, and taking another shot at that, because I'll ask you in a minute what you think, what your thoughts are on Jaren Hall, but I'm not completely out on him, but I would like to see another guy brought in, whether it's early or late, or I just would like to have another option there for, potential backup. But, I would rather spend the 11 if we're going back with Kirk, either trade down a little bit and get like an edge rusher, build up some defense, get, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy II, some of these guys that I don't know why I just listed the 2 Texas defensive tackles, but get a guy, that you can have contribute at a high level on defense and not a quarterback that's going to sit. And I don't want to say you waste the pick, because like Kansas City did the exact same thing, right? They had Alex Smith and they traded up to, I think, 11 and took Mahomes, or they traded up to wherever and took Mahomes.
10.
And then, was it 10? Thank you. And so they trade up, they get Mahomes, they let him sit, and all the Kansas City fans, much like Vikings fans would do, they wasted the pick, and that's why we didn't win the Super Bowl, and why didn't we take a defensive player, and blah, 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 blah. And then the next season, he wins the MVP, and everyone's like, oh, okay, that so it worked out. So I don't know. There's definitely some options. I want to get your opinions. I'm going to rapid fire some guys at you here, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I apologize, but these are just some names that I've seen coming to the Vikings. Some people love them, some people hate them. We're going to start with a guy that I don't hate. I actually like him a lot. In Bo Nix. He's very, what's the word? He's very not patronizing. I can't remember I'm not good at English, but he's very like decisive or divisive is the word in Vikings fandom. Some people love him because of the mobility and the Mahomes type stuff he can do. Some people hate him because he kind of has a noodle arm. What are your thoughts on Bo Nix, assuming you could get him in like the 2nd or 3rd round?
I'm not in love with him to be the Vikings solution for a couple reasons. One of them is a little weird. The first one is that his average yards per target, average yards per throw is dinky compared to these, titans of industry that are in this draft. So it would be more of a developmental thing where, hey, the Vikings trade back and they get Bo Nix. You'd say, all right, I trust O'Connell to develop him. And I would get excited about it because I'm guessing Kirk would be back. or Russell Wilson would be here for cheap or something. I don't think it would be Nix in week 1. I would find a way to get behind it, like I'm sure everybody would. But the thing that I don't like, and I say this every year, whether the Vikings need a quarterback or not, is you have 5 or 6 of these guys that are going to be in round 1 or the beginning of round 2. Most of them, or at least half of them, aren't going to be any good. And I really can't see Drake May being the guy who's going to be bad. I can't see Jaden Daniels being the guy. Caleb Williams scares me a little bit because it just seems like every pass he throws is like this big chaotic experience where it might be because his offensive line sucks, but it's just odd to me that every highlight you see of Caleb Williams, it's like Fran Tarkenton on crack. And so when you start to look at all of the let's say the 6, if you include Penix, you're like, all right, all 6 of these guys are not going to be good. 2 of them are going to flat out suck. 2 of them are going to be pretty good. 1 might be great, and 1's going to live in the middle. And unfortunately, if I had to rank all 6 of them, I'd put Nix as the guy that's not going to end up being very good. Because I wish this was a Dustin theory that said, hey, half the quarterbacks are going to stink. But down the line, every year, there's never one single draft class that gets it all right. And regrettably, for Nix's sake, I think he would be the one that would be on the naughty side of the ledger.
All right. Yeah, I disagree. I don't disagree because I see the bust potential. Like it's written all over him. Like you said, the average depth of target. He had an awful Senior Bowl going down there, and everyone was like, "Oh crap, this guy doesn't seem like he can really push the ball at an NFL level like you would like." And he's old. I mean, I'm not, I'm not in love with him. I'm just saying, I don't hate him as much as other people hate him. But let's get into the other guy, Michael Penix Jr., who for some reason I keep seeing this and hearing this from people when I talk about football. Michael Penix Jr. is not a good mobile quarterback. He doesn't really make plays off platform that much, or at least not that I saw. He really, and this sounds like lazy scouting. It's not. He reminds me so much of Tua Tagovailoa. It's not fun. It's not the left-handed throw. It is he plays within structure, and if you disrupt the structure, a la Michigan, suddenly it's like, oh crap, now what do I do? And he has injury history. I like Penix as like a maybe trade back into the second. I think Penix, he is my Bo Nix, where I'm like, yeah, I mean, it just feels like his ceiling is Tua. And if you could go back and redraft that draft, I don't think Tua goes nearly as high as he did. And again, that's Penix's ceiling, not his, not, oh yeah, he's gonna be Tua. So, Michael Penix, what do you think of this guy?
It drives me nuts that he's already 24, and I said this last year when we got into Hendon Hooker mania. I was like, this is the one time in forever the Vikings are going to use their pick on a quarterback. Can we please not get the oldest guy imaginable? It's like, why do we have to do that? And that's where Penix isn't as quite as old as Hendon Hooker, but my beef with Penix is not performance related. I agree with you on that mobile quarterback thing. There's some guys that you look at, like the way that they're built and the way they throw it, you're like, oh, I bet you that guy can take off and scamper. And then they never do it. Teddy Bridgewater would hardly ever take off and run. And you know that he was a little quick, and he just almost refused to do it, as at least consistently. My biggest fear with Penix is predictable. Now, you'll recall very vividly that when the Vikings signed Marcus Davenport, and then he had the high ankle sprain, all we saw on Twitter in those weeks was, you knew this guy had an injury history. Kwesi Adolphus-Mensah's a moron. Well, if we draft Penix with the first round pick, or he slides into the second, and we're hanging out week 11 next year, and boom, he tears something, we're going to stare each other in the pupils and say, we knew this was going to happen. This is what he does. So that's what I'm paranoid, is we already have the evidence that says this guy has a large infirmary report. For his sake, he's been healthy the last 2 years. But what I would be hoping for is just crossing my fingers every week, like, all right, he can't get hurt, because I'm pretty sure he's going to play quite well. He can throw it. If his team would have won the national championship and he would have looked good, we'd be talking about him at number 11 and maybe even in the top 10. So it's kind of like Bo Nix. I'm a little higher on Penix because I like the way he throws it. But I swear, the ultimate cynical fan base, which we are as Vikings fans, we have been warned that this guy, everything tears on this guy, and we think that the unlucky franchise is suddenly going to get lucky. That's what makes me a little freaked out about Penix, although that national championship semifinal was pretty luscious.
No, it was, and that's the thing is you see that he can really sling it, and he does have like really good arm strength. He's got like a Phillip Rivers, just kind of flick of the wrist, and he launches the ball. But like you said, the injury history, it's not like we're talking about like he blew his knee out his sophomore year. He had like necks, I think. He had 2 ACLs. Like at Indiana, he could not stay on the field. He goes to Washington. He stays healthy. He has some really good seasons, but like I think it is telling that against the Pac-12, he puts up all these numbers, and the Pac-12, rest in peace, was kind of known for having some shoddy defenses, to say the least. And then he goes against Texas, who I didn't look at Texas as some unstoppable powerhouse team this season. I thought their defense was kind of gettable, and I love Quinn Ewers, but they never really seemed like... I never thought Texas was winning the national championship. So he goes out there and he throws for a parade against Texas, but then he goes up against the best defense in the country, and it's just they're knocking him off his spot, and he had a couple of throws where it's like... there were multiple times where I was watching that game and I was rooting for Washington. I was rooting for a good game, but I was rooting for Washington after a while, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's got him, and the ball's floating in the sky, and I'm waiting for I'm waiting for it just fall into the breadbasket and be a and it was like 10 yards overthrown because he got knocked off his spot and had to, play outside of structure, and I feel like that's like, this is what I sound like, I'm criticizing Kirk Cousins, because that's one of his things, right? As everyone says, oh, he can't play outside of structure. I just don't think Penix can. I would love to see Penix have success, especially if he does end up coming to the Vikings. We're going to very quickly here just go into... We're going to preface this, and I'm going to give you a chance to preface it as well. Neither one of us want this to happen. Both of us are in agreement that we want a quarterback taken at 11 or higher than 11. We want the next guy. We want to move into the future of Vikings football with a young face running the franchise. But if the Vikings decide, we love Laiatu Latu. I love Laiatu Latu, even though I just went through all the injury risks with Michael Penix, and now I'm talking about a guy who had to retire from football. But whoever it is, if they love somebody and they take a defensive pass rusher or whatever, maybe they go with a guy on late day 2, day 3 even. These are some of those guys. I'm going to really quickly let you give we're in agreement, right? No, we don't want this to happen, but if it does... Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I was just double checking. I have 2 guys. There's one that I completely forgot about that I have to shout out that I wish would have went back to college. Cam Ward out of Washington State has some traits, and he didn't really get to that like peak level, but man, you watched him play, and some of the dimes that he was dropping to his receivers, they just look special. I think he could be a guy that goes late day 2, maybe even like mid day 3, that ends up stouting, similar to like an Aiden O'Connell, where it's like, how did nobody think that this guy could be kind of solid, at least? And I actually think the ceiling is higher on him than it is with O'Connell. I'm a big fan of his. But my guy, I'm going to let you get your guy in, and then I'll get mine, and then we'll end the show. But day 2 or 3 quarterbacks, that kind of vibe.
Okay, so I absolutely do not want this as the solution, because we've tried it with Kellen Mond. We've learned that didn't work. Jaron Hall didn't get off to a great start, and he's going to be 26. I don't know if he's ever going to morph in. And the most dangerous thing the Vikings can do this draft is to wait on a quarterback until, Jordan Travis later on or something like that. And you have a couple developmental guys chilling there, and then you run it back fully committed to Cousins, and then you go 9-8 or 8-9, and you miss the postseason. You're going to alienate guys like me that are extremely pro Kwesi and extremely pro O'Connell, if they just run it back with Kirk and then they miss the postseason. That would actually generate hot seat for Kevin O'Connell. So with all of that, and I don't think they're going to do that, but that would be like the doomsday scenario. If they absolutely must endorse this, like let's just wait until sometime in round 2, round 3, round 4, I guess I could warm up to Michael Pratt from Tulane. I think with Kevin O'Connell's tutelage, he has enough in his toolkit to eventually be good. But to me, if they are, and you can find really good quarterbacks from round 3, round 4, Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson. Yes, it can be done, but the Vikings have shown that doesn't never really happen to them. And they've never drafted a quarterback with a top 10 draft pick. They haven't drafted a quarterback in round 1 since Bridgewater. I think it's just time to do the first round. However, if they must wait until, I don't even know how far Pratt will fall. It's one of those things where, because the league was so weird with needing quarterbacks last year, he could go in round 2. Otherwise, like Malik Willis just kept falling and falling. Hey, it's round 3 for Pratt. Yeah, I could warm up to him, but then this would again have to be accompanied by a full commitment back to Cousins, because Pratt's not going to be their week 1 starter in 2024. If you can hear by the tone of my voice, I really want them, because they've called it a competitive rebuild, emphasis on rebuild, the last 3 off seasons. I can't see any scenario where they're like, you know what, we're the one team that's rebuilding, but we're not getting a quarterback, baby. So I remain steadfast that they are going to draft their quarterback, and I hope it is in the first, 40 picks, rather than some dipshit in round 4 that they hope that they can just develop.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a step further, though. I like that you said in the first photo. It needs to be in the first, 8 picks for me. Like, I don't, yeah. If by some miracle we are sitting at 11 and JJ McCarthy is still there, I would jump all over it. I like JJ McCarthy a lot, but I completely agree with you. Let's not do the, I don't want to, because I think that if you are going to go this route and you're going to get a guy like Michael Pratt, or a guy like Cam Ward, you're talking about Cousins being back on hey, you're retiring with the team deal. And it's 3 years, we're not talking about a 1 year guarantee. No, we're talking about Cousins, you're going to be in Minnesota until, you're getting your AARP retirement, funds and stuff and all this. So, my guy that I wanted to throw my name in the hat for was Spencer Rattler. I think the best way you can describe him is, imagine if Patrick Mahomes was stupid, because he is just he just throws a really pretty ball and he runs around like a chicken with his head cut off, and then he bombs it. He has a huge arm. He has a bad rap because he was on a Netflix show, QB1 or whatever, and he kind of looked like a jackass on that show. I haven't actually watched it personally. This is just everything that I've heard said about him. But I guess he looked like a jackass on there, and then he went to Oklahoma, and he didn't look good, and he looked like an idiot. And then he went to South Carolina, and South Carolina, their offensive line was terrible, so he was literally running for his life in almost every game he was playing. I still think that there are some traits there. He won Senior Bowl MVP. I did think he helped his draft stock in all of his interviews that he's doing behind the scenes. He's getting nothing but rave reviews about this guy has grown up. This isn't the same jackass that was on Netflix in 2019 or 2020. This is a man now. And it's what? You're telling me that shoving an 18-year-old kid in front of a camera and telling him he's the next, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, whatever, the next superstar of the world, you're telling me he acted foolish? What? It was like when Justin Bieber, was going 100 miles an hour in his Mercedes or in his Maserati whenever he was 17 years old. And it's what? You're telling me kids are acting stupid? This is crazy. But yeah, man, Spencer Rattler, I like him, but I don't think the Vikings are in a position to be if Rattler, let me phrase it this way. If Rattler was in last year's draft, I would have been pounding the table day 2, day 3. Get him. He has so much potential. He has so much talent. It is just, he is waiting to just be, have something unlocked in his head to be oh, okay. And then he can just go. We could have such good value there. I would love to have taken him last year. The Vikings aren't in that same position they were, where they had Cousins under contract for another year. We're staring down a season of Nick Mullins at quarterback, ladies and gentlemen. We need to get somebody in the building that can take that job in training camp and then lead the Vikings to potentially a Houston Texans-esque season. So you know, you hold it here. I think Drake May and Jaden Daniels are the two guys that a lot of Vikings fans are clamoring for. If Caleb Williams did fall, this will be the final topic of the night. I know you said that you had some scares about him. Mine is like you said, he looks like Fran Tarkington on crack. I'm gonna steal that. That's the only way I'm gonna talk about him from now on. Yeah, it seems like he doesn't want to play in structure. Do you think that is him just wanting to play, like how Pat Mahomes and how, I'm trying to think of like some of the great all-time scramblers that we've seen, how they play, but do you think he just wants to play that style and that's why he does it? Or do you think it was a lack of personnel at USC that led him to Fran Tarkington on crack, as you put it?
What I've deduced, because I mean, you saw a lot of the Caleb Williams in the last 2 years when he was the foregone conclusion as the first overall pick. So you had to start to study him, and I totally. Like, I would be enamored if he fell to number 3 and the Vikings went up and got him. I'd be like, hell yes, baby. But I tried to, and I believe it is the offensive line, and then perhaps with Addison gone, like a little bit like diminished, like pass catchers or something. Because what I don't understand is why would every sweet ass highlight from Caleb Williams have to involve all of that skullduggery? Because you shouldn't want to do that. You should want to take a 5-step drop, boom, find your guy. And it just seems like everything is forced impromptu. And maybe I've come up with this take because the Bears are going to take him, and I'm trying to talk myself into they're not going to finally be solved at quarterback. But he's like the only quarterback that I've scouted in 15 years where the chaos is mandatory, and then the play ends up marvelous. So this isn't like, oh, hey, the guy he doesn't know what he's doing. It's that the commotion has to follow him, and then he's good. I'm gonna guess he'll get an NFL offense, and then he'll just cook in the pocket, and everything will be hunky dory. But yeah, that's really the only thing that scares me, because Drake May, when you watch his tape, is kind of the opposite. It's just like Justin Herbert. It's calm. It's methodical. When it breaks off structure, it's smooth. Every throw is just crisp. And Williams does all that too, but it's like it's a force. It's a force like, oh shit, here we go. Let's run all over the place. And I don't see that from Drake May. So I'd rather, if the Vikings have their pick of this at number 2 or 3, which is that's a big ask. I mean, I don't know for sure that they're going to trade up in the top 3. They probably won't, but that's what I think. So no, Caleb Williams doesn't scare me like he's going to be the guy that everybody gets wrong. He's going to be a bust, but I'm just dumbfounded why every Herculean highlight for him does involve Fran Tarkington on crack.
Yeah, I think that that's just so beautifully said. I can't even really add anything to that. It really is. It's every play that you're watching him, and then you watch when it doesn't go right, and you watch him melt down against Notre Dame. Go Irish. Big Irish fan here. Not really. I'm a passive fighting Irish fan, but just for my father. But you watch him have a meltdown against the Irish, or you watch him have a meltdown in the second half against Colorado, and it's like, buddy, what are you doing? Like, just chill out, take your 2 or 3 steps. Even a guy like Jaden Daniels, who's such a big component of his game, is the scrambling, and not just scrambling to do the Pat Mahomes thing or the Aaron Rodgers thing where you roll out, find your guy deep, and then buy yourself time to throw. Jaden Daniels' game involves running just to look for a lane to go get, maybe a touchdown on a run and break one off. Even Jaden Daniels, you watch him play, and some of his highlights are like 5-step drop. Hey, Malik Nabers is one of the best wide receivers in the country. He's wide open. Bam, throw it to him. He catches it, touchdown, go celebrate. And like, even a guy like that is creating in structure, and you just didn't see it with Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams does have some, there's bust potential there. I also think there is some scouting fatigue going on of this guy unfortunately got anointed as the next guy a year before he could declare for the draft. So everyone was like, okay, we're kind of tired of this now. So now we're going to vilify him, and we're going to turn him into, oh, how dare you cry after you lost a game, and go hug your mom because you were upset because you basically just lost out on a chance to win a national championship. Like, I didn't buy that take so much, but yeah, I think it's there. Fern Talkington on crack is definitely, that's gonna live in not infamy. That's gonna be a famous quote for this show for years to come, especially if he ends up in Chicago. Really quickly, I will let you say your final thoughts. It can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about quarterbacks. You can go on a rant about politics if you want. I politely ask that you don't, but whatever you want to talk about, football or not, and then I'll give mine and we'll get out of here.
Sure. I want everybody to lower the temperature or get rid of their anxiety about Justin Jefferson's extension. If you think for 1 second that the Minnesota Vikings ownership and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to say, you know what, we're not going to pay you. Why don't you? I mean, first, he can't really leave for the next 2 years anyway because he has fifth-year option and they can franchise tag him. It won't even get there. But this stuff that came from Pro Football Talk, like, hey, the Vikings are hesitant about guaranteeing more than 1 year. It's like, at the end of the day, Hawkinson still got $42 million guaranteed. I don't care if it was like the day that he was signed. Like, the 64% of that deal was guaranteed. They're not stupid. They're not like these guys that are like, hey, we woke up today. Should we re-sign Justin Jefferson? No, I want people to have perspective. Right now, CeeDee Lamb, same draft as Jefferson. He's waiting for his contract. Tristan Wirfs, same draft as Jefferson. He's a Buccaneer, a tackle. He's waiting for his contract. I want people to realize this isn't just like this Jefferson being shunned. It's just that he is about to break the bank for the largest non-quarterback deal in history, and the Vikings want to ensure that they're doing it right. You have in Jefferson a Steph Curry-like marketing entity in the NFL. The Vikings are not going to say, you know what, this is too tantalizing. We're going to trade him away and get a bunch of draft picks. Because then you'd have a competitive rebuild where you got rid of the probably second best player in football. You don't have a quarterback. And this is not how the team is going to be run. So I want people to be patient. Jefferson's going to get his huge deal. Anything that's presented from ProFootballTalk.com that says, hey, the Vikings are skittish about giving this guy guaranteed money beyond 1 year, that is a guy's opinion that was presented to the world as fact. And it's not going to be this big major hiccup that, hey, Jefferson's not coming back. I want people to realize what level of athlete Jefferson is. Even if the Vikings quietly behind the scenes, godforsaken, said something stupid like, well, if we sign this guy, we're only going to go 9-8 and 8-9 for the next 5 years. They might be okay with it because of the amount of money Jefferson's going to bring in, from being the face of the franchise. Of course, they don't think like that on the whole. But Jefferson is too precious of a commodity just to say, you know what, we're going to be the team that didn't pay him. So anything of paranoia, like any report that you say that, hey, Jefferson wants to see who his quarterback is before he signs, of course he wants to know who the quarterback's going to be. Like, he doesn't want to make sure he's going to have a carousel again. I can guarantee you if they said, hey, we're going to trade up and get Jaden Daniels from your school, he's going to be like, hell yeah, baby, see ya, Kirk. Like, he's going to warm up to it. So reduce all anxiety about Jefferson. The contract extension will get done.
It almost reminds me of the Xavier Rhodes contract situation from years ago, and I didn't follow the team as closely. Like, I was a big fan, but I wasn't doing a show and watching every move that they made and reading every report that came out like I do now. But I remember, just as a fan in Cincinnati, in the middle of it's baseball season, right? I'm going to my Reds games and I'm living my Cincinnati life, and I remember like just feeling this anxiety about like, well, we have to bring Xavier Rhodes back. And I know they're different levels of player. We're talking about the best wide receiver versus a really good corner. But still, I just remember having this anxiety in my stomach. And then I was like, I remember the day they announced it, I was like, why would I think that they would not bring him back? Like, why? That was a stupid thing to be anxious about, like football anxious about. Obviously real life stuff gets in the way, but yeah, it's funny that you say that because my take was also going to be on the Jefferson thing.
Oh yeah,
I can't. Yeah, it was. I can't remember where I heard it from, but somebody said when information leaks, try to figure out why it leaked because like. The Vikings, Kwesi didn't call up Mike Florio and say, hey, well, the Wilfs won't let me give him guaranteed money, click. And, so, he didn't just do that for shits and gigs. He decided, nobody decided. I do think Florio has a source somewhere. If I had to guess, probably Jefferson's people, probably an opinion of one of Jefferson's people, that Florio, like you said, gave it as fact, and now the fan base is panicking, and there's a lot of pressure on the Vikings and the Wilfs to sign this man and to potentially cave on some of their, it's negotiations. It seems like it's messy and it's sloppy. And at the end of the day, the NFL is a business. Jefferson should be the highest paid receiver in football. I don't think that's crazy. Honestly, the biggest takeaway I've had from the last few days of contract negotiations and reports and stuff is that, Jefferson, I saw, he said the demands, well, he wants to be the highest paid receiver. And I immediately did like a little heel click in the air, whoopee jump, because I was like, hey, this means this guy doesn't want to make, the highest paid non-quarterback. Maybe he just wants to make like $32 million a year instead of like $30 million a year. So maybe we might end up getting a bargain a little bit here if we're just basing it off of Tyreek Hill rather than basing it off of Nick Bosa, because I think Nick Bosa got the highest paid non-quarterback. So we will see how that plays out. One thing that I will point out, important dates to look at. Last season, Carolina traded up with Chicago. I believe it was like the second week of March, or the first week of March, to get the number 1 pick. So if the Vikings are moving up into the top 3, potentially, that trade could happen within the next month. And that's exciting. That's exciting to know that, any day we could all be sitting there and get a buzz on our phone from ESPN that the Vikings have traded up. And now they have the number 3 pick, and then we all get really excited and start buying jerseys with, Daniels on the back just for Drake May to fall, and then everyone have to atone their jerseys. But yeah, man, Dustin, again, I have to thank you for coming on. Guys, make sure you shop unified. Follow the show on Twitter at LTB Vikings. Even though he wasn't here tonight, we miss him. Will Goodwin, follow him at Will Bad Lose, and check out the Bad Loser blog. And then share the show with your friends, subscribe to the YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Dustin, I don't even know what your title is on VikingsTerritory.com. It should just be the GOAT. It should just be the GOAT of VikingsTerritory.com, Dustin Baker. I know you're posting stuff there all the time and you're writing articles and doing all of that. One more time, tell the people where they can find you. Talk about VikesNow, plug yourself.
Sure. I'm the editor of Vikings Territory, and we have about 7 dudes that write religiously on the site on a daily basis. So if it happens to or from the Vikings, it's covered by us. And then VikesNow is my YouTube channel. It's really growing. A guy named Tyler Ireland who writes for Daily Norseman. He's come aboard in the last couple months and really done the producer role quite well. So we got a little entourage there that's going to be putting out some of their own shows. And that's semi-daily on YouTube. I'm usually too busy with family on the weekends to record anything. And then one final note, you talked about the realism timetable of a trade like the Panthers did last year. Right about this time, give or take a week, is when Case Keenum was announced in 2018 to not be coming back. And I know that Kirk Cousins is a little bit more established than Keenum was, but we're really in a tender phase of this February month where you could get a report tomorrow that says Vikings plan not to extend Cousins, and then we're really off to the races for oh God, what are they going to do? So yeah, that could be any time between now and especially, legal tampering on March 11th that you'll get a Cousins verdict. And I will end the show on that note that this offseason starts. It doesn't stop, but it absolutely starts with what they decide to do on Kirk Cousins.
I love it. So make sure you're following. I always forget which way to point. Make sure you're following Dustin. Make sure you're following us. We'll see you guys next week. I'm sure we'll be talking about more positions in the draft and going into some scouting and stuff. Make sure you tune in. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I'll leave you as always with a skull, y'all.